This is the story of a young married couple in 1967 who ended up in the Supreme Court because they filed a complaint in Virginia because they were accused of committing a crime because Richard Loving decided to marry Mildred.
The Lovings were a very loving couple. They got married in D.C., but later moved to Virginia and found out that it was illegal to be married there. They sued for violation of the Equal Protection Clause in the court, and they followed it all the way to the Supreme Court. And it was found that it violated the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution.
States that had the law that interracial marriage was not allowed had to change the law to allow it. This was a very significant case, especially in America, because while it did allow interracial marriage, which is a big part of the United States now, it also paved way in future years for same-sex marriage.
This case was very important to the entire U.S. because everyone agreed with the Lovings, and Virginia got a bit mad about that, and they still won the case, so it all turned out well. But a lot of people were rooting for them, and it was a big moment in 1967. In my opinion, it was pretty fairly settled. Like, Virginia shouldn't have had that law because that went against the Constitution. That's not allowed. And the Supreme Court made the right decision, the unanimous decision, to not let that happen.
This case is especially important in daily life now because there's almost nobody that is one race anymore, and that's especially because of this law, because while it was allowed in some states, during the Civil Rights Movement, there were a bunch of states that had different laws about different races. And so it was especially important. That was a big movement in the Civil Rights movement. It was a big part of the Civil Rights Movement, and it's just very important to America's history now.
And aside from the laws, it was pretty frowned upon if you got married to someone of a different race. And now it's pretty common and almost everyone has. So besides the laws, it was just like socially wasn't that accepted as it is now. In the 1960s, it was very unpopular and uncommon for two different races to get married and have mixed children. That was considered not a good thing, and it was insulting to your community and who you hung around with. And the government didn't want mixed children. They wanted to keep races separate, sadly enough. And especially if someone white married someone black, because before this time, black people were used as slaves, sadly. And so it was like an abuse of power if you married someone that was a lower class than you.
Especially with the government, the federal government didn't really have a problem with it almost, because it was mainly the states that had a problem with it, and these arguments with races eventually led to the Civil War, of course. But the federal government did not have a big issue with this. It was certain states that had this kind of law, especially in the Lovings case, because they got married in Washington. It was perfectly fine that they were married, and when they moved to Virginia, they had committed crime, so to speak, because Richard Loving had married Mildred Loving. So that was one of the biggest parts of this case, was just that interracial marriage was frowned upon in some places. Especially in one country, it's incredible how torn apart they could be almost by certain opinions. It was 1967, and a married couple filed a complaint with this. I don't know how to start it. Like,
Yes, can I start?
it was 1967.
Was the Unite of 67.
Okay, let's actually get started.
So,